Welcome to The Best Medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Bradley H. Werrell, and we're here to explore options and potentials to help us grow as individuals and as a community with one another in these difficult times and challenging times. We're exploring all manner of potentials related to the human experience: physical, psychological, medical, spiritual. It's a wonderful opportunity that we now experience in this critical phase of our human evolution. And I welcome you to join us in our podcast, become more aware, and identify with people who are helpful and supportive of you in your efforts as a human being on this planet and elsewhere too. We're going to be meeting people who are doing things that are widely variant from what is so-called normal within our society, in the creative space, within the social space. Our common purpose, seeking to generate positive potentials to improve the lives of everyone in our sphere of influence, and to expand that sphere of influence so that we may positively influence others that are not yet engaged directly with us. That's the goal here. We will learn more about each other as we go. I wish you the very best. Thank you very much for tuning in. Well, we've got Sunny Sue. Is that how you pronounce your name, sir?
Yep, you got that right.
That's good. It's a good start. Maybe you'll introduce yourself for our listening and watching audiences.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a strategic designer, and I'm the founder of Paradigm. What I mostly do is I kind of bridge the gap between strategy and design to help new ventures be able to design themselves, fund, launch, and whether it's more of a product, an app, a website, a brand, or sort of like a digital service. My specialty is really bringing together all of those designed elements and then structuring them in a way so that they have an effective business model, an effective go-to-market strategy, expansion strategy, funding strategy, and beyond.
That's mind-blowing. It's like, how did you get involved in that?
Yeah, well, you know what? If I look back into my childhood, I feel like the signs were there from the very beginning. In middle school, I was involved in this sort of like an art convention near my hometown, and one of my friends had a booth there, and we went to visit. She was like, "Hey, you should hang out." So I hung out there, and I got to see, although, I mean, albeit we were all middle schoolers, but I got to see how she was creating art, demonstrating value, and then, exchanging it as a good, right? And I was like, this is interesting. And I wasn't so much interested in the business side of it at that time, but I was definitely interested in sort of like, how could I create something that other people saw as valuable, right? And so that began that whole journey. In high school, I started like my own t-shirt business. Without any starting capital, really, I figured out like, hey, how do I structure pre-orders, do marketing in a way that kind of gets people to all order and then order more off of the profit, because once people saw it, they inevitably were going to want some as well. I didn't know any of this was really called business or marketing or whatnot at the time. But I do know that all throughout high school, I was kind of caught in between, like, so I knew I wanted to get into tech, right? Innovation and so forth. And people were like, oh, you should go be an engineer. So I took a lot of computer science, but I always felt like something was missing. All my classmates were super passionate about it, but I always ended up, more focusing on sort of like the overall narrative of the program, or like the architecture of it. I couldn't figure out why, like, I didn't specifically get as into the programming aspect of it as they did, until I think about senior year. I went to a design camp at NC State. And that's why I even knew, oh, there are other majors besides graphic design, right? Industrial design, architecture, etc. And I was like, it was like this, the whole discipline was made for me. It's the perfect blend of science, intuition, creativity, critical thinking, math, finance, strategy, all kind of in one, at least from my perspective. So I ended up going to NC State for industrial design, and that's the design of products, brands, and businesses at scale. So not like a craftsman who's creating just one of things, but think like Johnny Ive, chief of design, really rather at Apple, creating the MacBook, which would then be in millions of users' hands, right? And so I fell in love with industrial design, and from there, everything just kept expanding. Probably around midway through university, I started getting involved with the entrepreneurship garage. Over there, they had a lot of business and engineering students, but very few teams even thought about design. And so I went over there. I was like, hey, I'm looking for a group. Ended up in like 10 groups. And I didn't know what I was getting into, but it was incredibly fun because, if there's three slices of a pie while business and engineering were there, there was a third one that I really got to fulfill. We're in the design school, we all filled the design pie and missed the other two, right? Over here in the engineering entrepreneurship garage, uh, they had the first two and not the third one. And then every project would go on to place in first or second that spring. And that kind of solidified a certain confidence myself. I knew the other projects. I knew that they were also good ideas, but ours were just communicated better in a way that created impact and delivered a message, both visually and narratively, to our audience. And even the research methods that we went dove deep into the psyche of the people we were working with and really looked at their heuristics, human factors, the nature of what motivated them or inspired them to take action and be influenced by our design. Um, that was kind of our advantage. And so that would go on to lead me to getting involved with a lot of corporate innovation projects. Mostly my professor started connecting me with some of these corporate innovation groups. So over the course of like I think the last 7 to 8 years, I have had the blessing to work with the Coca-Cola innovation team, the Deutsche Bank innovation team, LG, Lowe's, IBM, SAS, and it was really fun. I got to help them figure out, how do we develop new markets, how do we develop new customers, how do we create totally new products, unprecedented, that no one else in the world is working on. And it was incredible because I got to learn a lot about corporate ventures, and I learned tidbits about how mergers and acquisitions and portfolios and all of those
Yeah.
things worked. But I always felt like something was kind of missing, right? And so I started. I remembered back to like the entrepreneurship garage, and I started freelancing for some startups and entrepreneurs on the side for fun. Some of them were from my earlier connections. Some of them, they continue to work on their business, and now they're at a stage where they could work with me at like a professional level at that time. That was many years ago.
Mhm.
Uh, but but very quickly, once I kind of started letting myself get involved in that, they started raising capital. They started getting more customers. Their businesses grew, right? One business in particular, they raised $500,000 within 3 months of me working with them. And then we went on to go close deals with Adidas and Bose and Garmin and Gatorade, and it was super exciting. And so I jumped ship. I was like, I'm going to do this full time. And I did not know what I was getting into. At the time, the only thing I could think of was paying off my student loans, and that I loved doing what I was doing. So I let myself work 7 days a week, 100-hour weeks, and didn't realize the toll it was taking on
Yeah.
my mind and my body, until it got to the point where maybe I had somewhere between like 10 to 20 projects going on at the same time. I don't even remember. That whole little month or two period was a blur. But during that time, I realized that my systems weren't sustainable. And also, as soon as I paid off my loans, this was within a year of going freelance full time. As soon as I paid off my loans, I realized I didn't have like a specific goal that was driving me at that time anymore, and so it just made it all too much, and I was like really, really falling apart. So I had to take a little bit of a break. Went back to Taiwan with my family for about a month and a half. Only kept about 3 projects. During that time, I was like, I'm only one person, right? I can only do so much, and I can only be good at so many things. What do I really want, right? What do I really want out of life? Why am I pursuing this at all? Obviously, I don't want this business to be like this for forever, right? So I have to be more intentional. I have to be more strategic. I have to design my business, right?
That's right.
I designed these other ones. Um, so it took me a while to figure it out, and even after I thought I had figured it out, the next few years it would still continue to iterate. But since then, we've had the pleasure of working with companies like Morning Brew, helping them design their brand, and they grew from a six-figure company to 13 million by the end of 2019, getting over 2 million new users. That was really incredible for us. Um, and then there's another entrepreneur out of New York where we designed a product and several different like brand and packaging lines for his products, and he got to over 10,000 customers worldwide. There's another company that is really more sustainability focused. And they got on Shark Tank, got invested in by Mark Cuban. And then just earlier this year, they raised another 3 million. And all of these things continually compounded on itself until where we are today, some 400 companies in that we've been able to help in our portfolio. We broke 9 figures as of 2019 in terms of our portfolio valuation. And just knowing that we've really concentrated on humanity-centeredness and founders who want to create change in the world and create a paradigm shift. So you probably noticed that company's name is Paradigm, and if you know the meaning of
well done, I like that.
Yeah.
A good plug. I like that a lot. Beautiful sign. It's very well done.
Yeah, thank you. No, but it really boils down to everything we do is all about mental models, right? Because right now, the market is getting faster and faster, and innovation is changing at like a lightning fast pace. And if we're not careful and we're not intentional, then it can be very easy to create things that are human-centered, but not humanity-centered, right? That's why we have things like Facebook. They started out with good intentions in mind, I think, right? And they certainly really understand us as people. They've really tapped into our psyche and what we need and want and desire, but they've forgotten about their impact on society at scale. And so it's not saying we should be more humanity-centered than we are human-centered, but I think it's the balance between the both, and people aren't thinking about the macro effects of what they're creating. And I think everyone alive now, we have a responsibility to make sure the next generations are living in a world that we truly believe is going to be the best that we can create for them. And so I realized that Paradigm had to exist, and the reason why it exists is because there's a big problem out there, and our goal is to solve that problem to the point that we no longer need to exist, that people are being humanity-centered and intentional about how they innovate and design their businesses, their ventures, the things they innovate on, without needing that external guidance or support. So in the meantime, we've been creating these methods and processes, these paradigms, so that they can be crystallized and handed off and taught to people, taught to our partners that are growing here with us. So, that background sums it up and leads to Paradigm ultimately being a venture studio, a business accelerator, and an entrepreneurial resource hub. And we've got goals for the future, but we might get to that later.
There you go. Very interesting. So was that undergraduate experience, or did you have graduate training as well?
I had intermittent graduate experience. Mostly I got into certain classes and so forth, but nothing official. And actually what I found is I did take an MBA course, and I would reconnect with them later and be working on different businesses. In fact, one of the businesses we created, Pure Coffee, out of that class of the 3-in-1 coffee roaster, grinder, and brewer, that actually ended up winning several competitions, raising a ton of capital. And then we worked on it for a while until we reached kind of an endpoint with that. But I learned from a lot of them that, one of the best ways to really get the most out of getting a business education is to just do it, to just get in it, because there's, you could study all day long, right, about this subject, that subject, but until you actually are there doing it in real life, feeling the pressures of real life, having to balance and juggle everything at the same time, there's a lot of things that you can't quite fully absorb.
Oh, that's right. It's the humanity. It's a human interactive function there that you have to engage with, and it's like, yeah, it's not academic by any means. Yeah. And it's like I'm very impressed by the wide variety of experience you've had. It's just like a wild train ride, man.
Well, I kind of think that even my inherent personality is I'm kind of more of like a big picture systems thinker, and for me to do my best work, I need a bit of information from everywhere, right? Every industry, every horizontal. And what that means is I can carry knowledge from one to another, right? I can see parallels that other people won't see. If you're deep in one specialization or industry, because a lot of times we'll have a prospective partner say, "Oh, you've never done a liver scanning protocol before, right? How can we be sure that you'll be able to bring innovation and business success to what we're doing?" And I'm like, well, you don't want to be like every other liver scanning protocol, right? Look at where that's led them. We need to create something new. We need to actually look at the underlying mental models that govern this discipline and this industry and see how we can carry things that are successful in other precedents, rather, how we can carry those over and integrate them all into yours so you have something truly one of a kind, defendable, profitable, scalable, and sustainable.
Now, I was instructed to suggest to have you tell me about bringing a global standard of innovation and design to all industries, including the medical world.
Yeah. I remember, I think about 2 years ago, we actually did some really incredible work with the Duke Institute for Health Innovation. Every year, they take a few different cohorts where they've got scientists, doctors from the medical academic world, where it's just really interesting because they have the knowledge, they have the expertise, deep expertise that I will never have, right? And I don't understand half of what they're talking about. But then at the same time, we can bring our paradigms for design thinking, business innovation in, and that's kind of what they hired us to work together with them on, is to help their teams become a little more fluent in sort of like design and business. And so we start bringing up things like, well, have you talked to the people you're designing this for? Have you interviewed them? And that all sounds really basic, but sometimes you're so in the weeds with the medical technology and the science and the infrastructure that you forget that this still lives in the world of the human experience, right? And so we were able to not only come in there and tell them, hey, think about it this way, right? And how that actually will contribute to making sure you're creating something that these people actually want and can use, but also specific techniques like our diamond model and our research model and so forth, so that they could take those step by steps and make sure that before they create anything, right? A lot of these people had started engineering already, but they hadn't even talked to someone yet, right? And in hindsight, that sounds so obvious, but when you're in it and it's the first time you're doing it and you've been taught a certain way all your life, it can be very hard to get out of that mindset and shift into a new one, right? Paradigm innovation. But that was a pretty incredible way of how we could start bringing a few innovation standards into the medical field. And since then, we've actually been involved in a few other medical and healthcare related projects. One of which I think is really cool. They've got a whole philosophy around therapy, and how a lot of therapy right now is mostly focused on the physical, right? And even the ones that are about your mental, emotional, or spiritual, you tend to be still, right? So he combines movement with some of these more cerebral therapies. And he's built a whole philosophy around it, a whole curriculum around it, and a whole installation around it. And we've been helping him create a system where you go through and you actually learn a lot of the methods, and then eventually you become one of the kind of coaches as well, and you can share that therapy method with others. So that's been a really incredible thing that we've been working on. And then about a year ago, this was for a local kind of medical startup. We had the pleasure of kind of helping them re-envision their brand, helping them design a whole interactive website and system so that when they were going to talk to customers, partners, or even pitch to investors, that they had a succinct pitch that was not so lofty and technical that people looked at and were like, I don't know what this is talking about, but really spoke to them from a perspective of, usually when this type of strain is detected, it's already too late. But that's not why doctors go into this field, right? They go into this field because they want to be able to bring hope and joy into people's lives. They want to be able to save lives. And what's cool about this technology is they allow you to do it before it gets to the point of no return. And so being able to talk about that joy that like a doctor gets to do, share good news instead of just bad news, right? That was a really incredible experience.
It's good. I was also, hang on, gotta look at my note here. That I guess the human centeredness versus humane.
Yeah, human-centered
That is,
design versus humanity-centered design. So just like there's microeconomics, macroeconomics, right? There's the psychology of an individual and a person. There's the sociology of a whole society, right? I'd really say that's kind of the parallel. Um, Over the past 20, 30 years, there's been a surge in everyone talking about human-centered design, right? How do we understand the individual? How do we focus on the user and their motivations and their journeys, right? Um, and the different touch points they go on when they're using something like an app or a website. We can be intentional about those too, just like we are intentional about the architecture of a skyscraper, because we don't want those skyscrapers to fall in 5 or 10 years, right? And we don't want our businesses or our applications to fail in 5 or 10 years either. And so I think the human-centered part is really important because before that, we were just looking at the numbers, right? And it's not to say there weren't people looking at the human side of things, but it wasn't as prevalent and people didn't realize how important it was until some companies became gigantic as a result of it. Now everyone's paying attention because they're like, well, how did you do it? Well, we just focused on what was human, right? Um, on the flip side is with such a heavy focus on human-centered design, we started to lose some of the focus on humanity-centeredness. And oftentimes you can find that they're a little bit of a contrast, right? You know, what's good for the greater whole may not be good for an individual, right? Like if you look at, I guess like capitalism is maybe a little more favoring the individual compared to communism, which is a little more favoring the whole, right? You really, or socialism rather, you really kind of got to make a choice, but be conscious about the choices you're making, because if you're only human-centered, right, then an individual might get a lot of benefit from it, but when a million people are using it, it could become a monster, right? And if you're only humanity-centered, well, you could create something that the whole group will get a benefit or goal, but it might squash or steamroll a few individuals in the process.
that's interesting. I spoke with a gentleman who's he's a young fellow. He's 22 in Sweden, and he's leaving Sweden. He's like, Sweden is monolithic culture, and it's like, I said, why are you leaving? He goes, it's boring. Because it's impolite to excel, Sweden, and because it might make someone in the group feel bad. And so it's like a very interesting. He's told me that Benito Mussolini said that Italy or Sweden was a perfect fascist state because they're like a block, solid block of the people that will move together. So it's like kind of like this anti-individualism, pro-group mentality, which is kind of what you're talking about, which is the suppression of individualism for the benefit of the group. And it's like, yeah, it stifles innovation, and you know, it's just it is a dreary landscape kind of.
You find the balance between the two, right? So we have an organization that's working on what's called the Human Experience Index. There's about 8 to 12 categories. This is part of the global standard that we're working towards, but I know it's something that, you know, we might have 100 criteria in each of the categories, from political, social, economical, cultural, environmental, and they may be plus or minuses in each one. But you know, how do we compare whether this GoPro or this lighter or this card deck, which one is more innovative than the other? Where do we even start? How do we begin that conversation? How can we even define those? Well, right now you ask 10 people, 5 people even, what their definition of innovation is, and you get 5 different definitions. So just like marketing and design couldn't really advance as a discipline until we defined it and we started creating guidelines and standards, I think innovation is a similar thing. And with the need for innovation increasing because of the rate of the market growing and progress, right, we've got to have tools we can use to find out where we're at. Do we want to go down this path, or do we want to change certain criteria and be more intentional about it? Because I think without those measurements or those standards or metrics, it can be very easy to create something that does turn into a monster without our intention. And I don't think any of these social medias, they came, or you know, Googles and Amazons, I don't think they came out here trying to be evil, but currently they come off as a little bit psychopathic, right?
They sort of grew into it, I think. I don't know. It's like wow. It's like
Into it at scale, right?
yeah, it's like hey, let's do some experiments on manipulating people's emotionality by altering their news feeds a little bit and see what we get. And it's like, whoa, human subjects experimentation on people without their permission. How about that? And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, that's not even close to bordering on. You were way over the line on that one. And Google can doing similar things. It's quite stunning what can be done with the big data can do. And then the temptation thus exists for someone to design it and do it, because it's like we can work on the people instead of for the people.
Yeah, the ethics of design and innovation are such a hot topic right now. I don't know if you've watched Social Dilemma. It came out recently.
I know. I've been advised to watch that on a.
Yeah, well, you've been advised once again.
I know, it's in 2 days, man.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was very profound, and I know one of my big takeaways from it that hopefully would encourage other people to watch it as well was that, you know, my generation constantly is complaining about how the boomers screwed us over with this and that. And at the same time, we're the ones that have created what will inevitably screw over generations from now. And so, you know, now that we're aware of this, we need to be conscious about what we're creating, right? And I think that's where the Human Experience Index aims to kind of
like that
improve, right? Just having a measurement system means you at least have a better idea of where you're at. You get to stand on the shoulders of giants, but you also get to recognize who you're standing on and why you're standing on it. Because right now, I think people are just creating innovation for the sake of progress. And I think that needs to change. And it's on its way to changing. And that's why we're building the index. I think once we get I would say probably the consensus of maybe like 10,000 organizations, and I think we can truly begin building like an association around that and start having like an annual conference. But in the meantime, we're collecting people. We're bringing together that community of founders, entrepreneurs, business owners who are passionate and driven about improving humanity and improving the human experience. So I think that's where it starts.
I think that's right. I like that a lot. And it is good to have an objective metric, or at least some attempt at an objective metric as to where are we in this.
Exactly.
situation.
And our goal isn't to say this is good or bad, but wouldn't you like to know if you are more innovative in the political realm than this other group, or than this other innovation in the environmental side of things, and in what criteria? Because then you can look at the criteria and say, okay, actually, we want to make sure we have this criteria. We want to make sure we avoid this risk over here.
That's right. That's right. And so I think it is a conscientious awareness with intentionality to provide certain outcomes. And you're right on the money. It all comes to intentionality, and then I think that is orientation and awareness and consciousness of the situation as you develop it.
Yeah. Well, that entire description that you just gave me, that's literally design, right? Just like you can design a building, the architecture of it, just like you can design a product or website, you can design a customer experience, you can design a business, right? You can be intentional, conscious, and aware about how it develops over time and the decisions that you've made for it.
That's right. Wow. So it's a lot there. You're doing a lot. I'm looking forward to talking to you at length. I don't know what else to ask you. I'm like kind of blown away. I'm like, now you give me homework. I got to watch the show.
Well, I look forward to seeing you submit a report, right?
There you go.
Maybe we'll publish it.
Yeah, that's right. I'm working with there's a group out of JMU in Harrisonburg, Virginia, psychologist. It's quite interesting. He made a tree of knowledge system and a system for understanding how to. He said he was like this. He's like he's a tenured professor of psychology, and he's doing his psychology professor thing. And he's like, hey, wait, you know what? We don't even have a way to define psychology.
Oh my God, yeah, right. I was looking at the tree of knowledge diagrams and I was like, I don't even know where design would go in here. Some people have told me, oh, it's applied aesthetics or whatnot. And I'm like, okay, I think that's a big component of it, but there's also the kind of more mathematical side to it, right? To making sure the design is feasible. Like, how does that come into all of this as well? But I love looking at diagrams like that. I consider them also to be paradigms because they help us
That's right.
embody massive amounts of knowledge so that no matter what situation or scenario we find ourselves facing in, we have a toolkit. We can apply that toolkit and reach a conclusion, even if we don't have every single little detail and formula memorized.
That's right. So I recommend checking his stuff out. Greg Enriquez, Unified Theory of Knowledge, and the issue is this: is that he talks about the social space that we're working in. Like right now, we're talking to each other and engaging in a social activity. Is all about, it engages what he calls a justification system. How do we justify our position to the other one? And then why do you do this? And why are we doing these things? And so we have a system of justification, which happens to be breaking down in a global sense due to the innovation of the digital interface, right? So the digital interface, we're just now starting to get used to dealing with each other in a digital sense, which is the big innovation. Is like, it's huge. And he says, that's what's going on. And it's like, so what has happened is it's all fits and starts, and we're trying to figure out how to associate with one another in a digital sense with advanced communications. And there's a big paradigm shift occurring with regard to the elites of the former system of justification, which is failing, which is central broadcasting, is interfacing with the new innovators who are, it's all private and interconnected and without permissions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like there's a big shift occurring, and it's like, well, they don't want to go easy into the night.
Oh, of course,
the winners, right?
Innovation versus regulation, and the ones that became big off of a certain thing, they want to protect their kingdom, right? And you can't blame them for that either.
No, you have to be impressed by it, and it's like, okay, but it's at the same time, it's like, okay, still, how do I get around that obstacle, right?
Well, so cycle is the inevitable, like, rise and fall. So
that's right.
It's inevitable. I actually think from an innovation strategy perspective, and I literally lived this earlier this year, I'm sure many, many people did with coronavirus, is when we went into quarantine, all our partners paused. They said, we don't know what the future holds. We need to pause for a moment. So we're like, oh, well, I guess we're on pause too. And
right.
Everyone's freaking out for like 2-3 weeks. And then we realized that, wait, this is, from an innovation strategy perspective, the sooner you embrace the inevitable, the sooner you can look at it from an opportunities perspective. And so if you look at some of the biggest organizations who are still very relevant and investing in innovation instead of regulation, is that they're able to compete on the new battleground, right? Companies like Marriott and Coca-Cola, right? And Lowe's even, they're building innovation capabilities within their organizations whose job is to hunt out problems before they become problems, to find solutions before people are aware of them, to find new opportunities in the market and know about them 15, 20 plus years in advance. With my work at Bosch, I don't know exactly when, where, or how those innovations will come to market, but I know it's at least 10 plus years from now, right? And it's really interesting that they're building this portfolio of innovation and skills to be able to take on the demands of any unpredictable market. And I think the time of stagnant, gigantic empires that are unmoving is coming to an end. And some of those organizations are realizing soon enough that we need to have an agile body within our organization, entrepreneurship or whatever they want to call it, whose job is to seek out and hunt down these little flies that are whizzing around and try to capture those, right? Instead of just always aiming for the biggest things, because you find something new, you have the resources, the network infrastructure, the influence to actually make new, right? Even more so than your typical startup. So I think seeing the rise of corporate ventures has been really exciting. A lot of internal accelerators and incubators where they're encouraging their own team members to really look outside the box instead of just maintaining kind of the system. Of course, you need people who are maintaining the structure and keeping the mothership working, right? Because you can't sacrifice the mothership, but you've got these little tiny spaceships flying out and about that are a lot faster. They can duck and weave between all these asteroids, and they can find hidden treasure.
That's right. Well, it is. It's like I guess it's like it's the name of your company is quite appropriate. It's all about the way you think about the problems and organize it mentally. That it will define the field that you effect that you generate when you're going through the action of making it come into being.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. There was a whole strategy for that. It took nearly a year to really fully be confident and settle in on the name, and a lot of research, some thousands of iterations gone through. But I think we really arrived at a name that both describes what we do, right, but is also brand positioning wise something that is unique and something we can protect and grow for a very long time. So
Very
thank
good.
you for noticing.
It's no small thing, man. It's like it's just to be able to encapsulate it and put it out there in a minute, and it's like it twinkles the mind, right?
It's also our first pre-qualification test.
How so? How is that one?
Yeah.
Very good. Well, shoot, Sonny, I certainly want to talk to you about the work I'm interested in doing, which is innovation of a sort. But in that site, it's such a minor thing. I'm working on setting up a telemedicine service for a very limited amount of medical indications.
Mm-hmm.
And the purpose of it will be to be cash only, and for the purpose of eliminating extraneous influences in the doctor-patient relationship.
Oh, so starting to kind of maintain a clearer path of communication, removing some of the natural biases that really affect the patient experience. Oh, yeah. Oh my God. Patient experience is one of, I think, the most fascinating spaces, especially because there is actually a lot of regulation in that space. And sometimes with regulation and constraints, you get even cooler innovations because, well, if you had a fully blank canvas, you could create anything, right? Is it really truly creative at that point? But when you have these rules that you must fit within and yet still find new, sustainable, and foundational value, how do you piece those together? That's where the real problem solving comes in. So that sounds super exciting. That actually reminds me a lot about some of our kind of like future vision for how all of our different partners in our portfolio will eventually come together into what we. Are you familiar with Walt Disney's Epcot?
I'm familiar with that roughly, but not in particulars, but in a general sense.
Cool. So originally, his vision for it, if you look it up, you can find original plans and things. It was supposed to be a prototypical city of the future. And then he died and his brother turned it into something else entirely. But if you look up the original plans, which are available, you'll see that it's all built off of what we're currently defining under a new venture that we're working on called Nova as radial architecture. And radial architecture can exist both within the single building unit, but also within the greater infrastructure of like a whole city, township, or village as well, right? If you look at it from a purely like objective efficiency and a community perspective, the radialness, right, clusters that are also radial in themselves is really the most efficient structure. So we're looking at prototyping a few of these novas and so forth, getting up to the point of a super campus that we're going to call the supernova, which is a living, working, playing, learning kind of facility where we see things like the medical stuff, the engineering stuff, the political stuff, all of that kind of coming together in almost an institute format, but without the same like bureaucracy that academia typically has, to be sort of like its own fully functioning satellite within some other municipalities. We're looking at some areas right now, but I think that could be the future of how a lot of these disciplines kind of intersect or are able to leverage and bring each other up. Because I know there are some industries that are very stifled in all kinds of regulation, and there has to be a way to figure out how can we make innovation there, how can we help them stay up to date, right? And I think it starts with people like you who are working on these individual innovations, and that compounded over time with an organization that's kind of working on innovation from a patterns perspective overall, to really find what are the models that we can perfect how we create new medical or healthcare ventures, and especially in spaces of these future communities where things will become more term might be like globally localized, right? They're all connected in a
Right.
network.
Right.
They're all centralized in their own.
I like that. That's interesting. And I see that guy. I'm working on a wider project I call Res Publica, which is this public thing,
Mhm.
which is I see it as a potential foundation for the purpose of helping the people to organize their life, what in the global sense, like you're talking about, at every level, for this same purpose. And it's like, so what I see happening is like a coagulation of all these the people that are like, I regard you as a future thinker, and seeking to innovate, to create the system which is to follow the system which is now in failure.
Mm.
And it's like these people, and I'm watching this happen, is just they're attracting together like gravity. So they're coming together and then forming wider and wider networks, and getting stronger quite
Mm.
rapidly. And as the other one is fading out, because it's like its credibility is too low, of the central broadcasting,
Yeah.
and I was thinking about it yesterday, and it's like it is due to the fact that the pixelation is at too low of resolution to effectively map effectively onto the reality of the lived human experience. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I actually love that you mentioned gravity there. I don't know what you've heard about gravity, but our research and development kind of branch of paradigm, we've been looking at all kinds of theories about how like businesses grow, how markets change, how innovation demands, right? Um, and one of the biggest conclusions we've arrived at is this shift from traditional advertising, marketing, traditional sales towards something that is a little more relationship, community, and like longevity based, a little more collaboration based, a little more rising tide floats all boats kind of mentality. And so think about it with me for a moment. Like, what is the best kind of sale? A sale where you didn't have to sell. They came to you because they saw and understand the value, right? Okay, well, that demands that you've communicated it clearly and put it out there, right? Well, what is the best kind of marketing, right? Where you have opportunities, relationships coming to you without you having to do any active traditional marketing or advertising. Well, how do you do that? Well, there are things on this earth that spread information on their own, people, right? And through the relationships we have with people, think about the best opportunities you've had. They've been through existing relationships and relationships of those relationships, right? And through just 6 connections, supposedly, we can
That's
hit
right.
every relationship in the world, right? So what is the most powerful form of sales, marketing, advertising, whatever? It's really what I would consider, we're calling it gravity, but it's that force of attraction that comes through all the relationships and all the people that are connected to each other. It is our greater neural network, right? Our greater connected system between all of us. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about when you talk about the networks coming together and compounding across each other over time. And just like we can be intentional about the architecture of a building, we too can design this gravity system for our business, our organization, our brand, our identity, right? And the way our influence spreads through our relationships, and have all of those touch points be just as intentional and efficient as any other system we might create.
Yeah, so the interesting function of it is it's because it goes to this digitalization of our interactions in a social sense, which is it's very brand new. It's like 20 years, and it's just getting rolling really, and it's like we don't know what we're doing, and we're faking it as we go, and it's like, okay, so it's all like nervous. If you chop a nerve off, the nerve will grow a bunch of dendritic things. It's trying to find the pathway to get back in touch with what it's supposed to touch base with.
That's what we're doing. We're experimenting, right? Because we don't know the answer.
That's it. So it's okay. We've got to be willing to take our chances in the early morning, to before the sun comes up. It's a little dark, and it's like, okay, well, it's okay. We're going to get there, and it's just get ready for the sun, because it's going to be a bright day. Mm-hmm. That's what I see happening. I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Likewise here as well.
And it's like, well, what does that mean? I don't know. I like I say, I look forward to watching what you do, and maybe have an opportunity to interact with you on a professional basis with my interest, and very excited all about it. All very good.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. I think I would really enjoy that as well. Yeah.
Very good. Well, thank you again, and maybe we can chat again. You've got so much to go on about. I'm like so many adventures going. There's like a lot of cooking going on back there.
Hey, I mean, we're a venture studio. That's our job, right? Help design, fund, and launch new ventures, and that's what I do. So I could talk endlessly about it anytime you want. You've got my info.
Very good. Paradigm Innovations, is that the proper name?
Paradigm Innovation.
Oh, pardon me.
But yes, and we're a venture studio, business accelerator, and entrepreneurial resource hub. We help humanity-centered founders to design, fund, and launch their next product, brand, or business venture.
That's Sunny Sue. So Sunny, one last thing is where do they get a hold of you?
Um, I'll send you all the information to
The John.
but yeah, but our website is paradigm.cx, if you can manage to spell it, paradigm.cx. And then I think our handles, you can find it all on there.
Very good. We'll put it in the show notes and it'll be great.
Cool. And feel free to add me on LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever,
Very good.
if you want to see my musings and insanity.
Very good. Thank you, Sonny.
Thank you as well.
Take care. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Best Medicine Podcast with Bradley H. Werrell, D.O. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe below, either over there or over there. Also, if you're interested in a medical consultation with myself, there's also information below.